Work it, baby.
Welcome back, everybody. We're here on the set of Cabin Boy 2, where Dana's making his movie debut. Actually, we're here to do the movie review of The French Dispatch.
Dispatch.
Directed by Wes Anderson. But before we get into that, Dane, they brought our charcuterie.
It's finally here!
Finally.
Enfin!
Thank you, Garçon.
Thank you, Garçon, for bringing this excellent charcuterie. We've got a saucisson,
Yeah.
a fromage, a couple of fromages, a little bit of petit chocolat, and some biscuit.
Oh, nice.
French be perfect with a French cigarette after the end of this, but of course we're not in France.
I want a clove cigarette after this.
Where are we doing this from? The Orangerie? The back room?
Yes, the back room at L'Orangerie.
That's right, the back room of
the Champs-Élysées.
On the Champs-Élysées, yes.
All right.
Well,
before we dig in.
I'm digging in.
Oh, dig in. Okay. Well, while I dig in, why don't you tell our audience what they can do to help us out here?
Yes.
We're just a poor couple of French major literature students, so we're not going to make much money.
A couple of poor
in the
French
real
art
world.
Students.
Yes.
We are suffering art students in France.
Yeah.
And we need your subscriptions to get our count up to 1,000. Please, we're sitting at 145. Tell your friends, press le bouton rouge that you see down here. And again, as in all our films, comment by what date? After a raffle occurs, this Blu-ray, the French Dispatch.
Yes. Yes, the French Dispatch, once again, directed by Wes Anderson. So thank you, Dane. Ooh, look at this. I'll have a little fromage, maybe.
Fromage. Some cacahuète.
Cacahuète. Nut. Okay. All right. Let's talk about the French Dispatch.
Let me rumage about the French Dispatch. Go ahead.
All right. This movie was released October 22nd of 2021. Mm-hmm. So not that long ago, within the last 5-6 months here.
That was during the pandemic. It was filmed then.
Yeah.
Right?
It did U.S. box office of $16 million. And I'm going to tell you that's not too bad, actually, for being COVID and being a more art housey
movie.
Yeah, this is not a Marvel movie. This is not a big budget movie.
Like
so
James Bond or anything like that.
Worldwide box office, $45 million. Screenplay by Wes Anderson, but also Roman Coppola and Hugo Guinness. So 3 people.
Oh, so Coppola's, I'm assuming, Francis Ford Coppola's nephew or something like that? Or...
I'm going to guess that there's a relation there.
This is a damn good fromage.
Wow. Oh.
This one.
Which one?
Gouda. It's like a smoky Gouda.
This one? Okay. All right. So this movie was directed by Wes Anderson, also known for Rushmore, Royal Tenenbaums, Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, Fantastic Mr. Fox, Grand Budapest Hotel, and now French Dispatch. Mm-hmm. Now, if I was to go through everybody who stars in this movie, or who's in this movie, we could be here for days because there's a lot of players and a lot of famous people. But I'm just going to talk about right now the top 4 actors that are in this, because the main character is Bill Murray, and he plays Arthur Howitzer Jr. Interesting, Howitzer. I always think of a gun.
The cannon.
The cannon.
The howitzer.
Yeah. Benicio del Toro, who's kind of the star in Act 1.
Starving artist.
We know
Tortured artist.
Know him from Sicario, Sin City. The star of Act 2 was Timothy Chalamet.
Chalamet, your brother.
Yes.
Making another appearance.
I know. We saw him in Dune earlier in episode 4, I believe, where we did our Dune review. And
Thumbnail.
Yep. Thumbnail. And then lastly, kind of the main character for Act 3 was Jeffrey Wright. And he's everywhere lately. He's in Westworld. We saw him in James Bond as Felix Leiter. He's upcoming in the new Batman as Commissioner Gordon.
Right, the commish.
Yeah, right? So, now, I know you love Wes Anderson, and so does Hollywood. Everybody wants to be in his movies.
Oh,
the critics love him. So I was interested to see how many Oscars was this movie nominated for
This year?
this year. Because, you know, Wes Anderson, he's always on that list. So I was surprised to say 0 nominations.
0. Zed.
Yeah.
Would say.
Zed's dead, baby. So no Oscar nominations.
Killed by a samurai sword.
No Oscar nominations.
That's a travesty.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
I was surprised. Here's the movie summary for this. Faced with the impending dissolution of the French Dispatch, a factual weekly report on various subjects, old-school editor-in-chief Arthur Howitzer Jr. assembles the creme de la creme of the magazine's loyal expatriate journalists for one final issue. Basically, that's it. So Dane, just like in a Wes Anderson movie, we are doing a time jump. And we are coming back in time to tell our viewers that we're about to go into spoilers, right?
Spoilers! There's some spoilers right over here, over your shoulder, right around here.
Oh, like right here?
Yeah, right around
Right
here.
around here? Okay. So,
So come back.
yeah,
at this time, right around
if
here.
you want to avoid spoilers, come back at this time and we'll do the Cult Lords ratings. And you can see what we rated this. As you can see, time lapse, time jump, charcuterie board.
Someone's
almost
eating all
gone.
our charcuterie board.
Yes. All right. We'll see you back then, fans. So it's really hard, Dane, to describe this movie and like the plot of this movie compared to other movies. There's definitely a plot. I mean, it starts off in Liberty, Kansas, of all places. I mean, I know we're talking the French Dispatch, but it's in Liberty, Kansas, and this is where Arthur Howitzer Jr. and his family has kind of made their name. And what he's done is he's taken a little newspaper there, and he's decided to make it more of a global newspaper by hiring the best artists, the best writers from wherever they are in the world to talk about whatever subjects are on their minds, you know, what people might find fascinating, you know, a lot of it's travelogue, art and culture, yeah, and tell us like what's going on in your part of the world.
Right.
Right?
To bring the world to Kansas.
Bring the world to Kansas. But this publication is actually a global publication because other people in other countries read it too. Mm-hmm. So, but he knows his time is ticking. He knows that his end is coming near. And so he wants to kind of bring them all back, and he tells them that, you know, he actually prepares a will that whenever he dies, this newspaper is supposed to be disbanded. Right?
Right.
And everything's going to be sold off and all this stuff.
Kind of told in weird, disparate time jumps there,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. But he wants everybody to get together and put together, you know, one last good edition, you know. But then it goes through and it tells the stories and these different acts about some of the stories that some of these writers go out and get and create. And they kind of tell the story almost posthumously in some of them. Because I think the Jeffrey Wright one, I think it was posthumously, but anyways, you know, they tell the stories that they tell. Mm-hmm. So Act 1 is really centered around Benicio del Toro, and it's called The Concrete Masterpiece. Mm-hmm. And what is, Dane, explain to everybody, what is Benicio del Toro's situation in this movie?
So definitely the two-word tortured artist comes into play
Yes.
here. So he is grew up, you get a little bit of this, but he was an artist who had done a bunch of things and then decided one day after some insults of some very rude Frenchmen in a bar to go and kill them and cut their heads off. That the French government decided, well, this guy's insane, put him in a prison, and then I forget what the woman's name is, that's the prison guardian. Mm-hmm. She somehow inspires him to do art. Mm-hmm. And so she's basically like kind of in a sense his whipping muse.
Yes.
For lack of a better description, where, you know, he draws her, he paints her, But then she also, keeps him in line because she's the guardian of the prison. Kind of the foreman of the prison. Mm-hmm. And, but his work is not realistic whatsoever. It's extremely modern art. And the movie takes place in what time frame? Probably like 1954-ish?
I don't know.
55? I mean, it's not modern.
And what's interesting about this is, as we're learning about Benicio del Toro, and his name is Moses Rosenthaler in this movie. His life is being told at a lecture that's going on. And the person who's giving that lecture is Tilda Swinton. Do you remember? She's like a big social.
Oh, yeah.
Talking about, who Benicio del Toro is. And
she's definitely talking in hindsight about how his background is.
Yeah. J.K.L. Berenson is her name. So
right. And so she's describing it at almost like a university art club group in front of a big audience.
Big audience.
And she's talking about how his background, like we said, his in this particular case, and this is the weird thing about the movie is that it's not the time jumps.
This is the weird thing about the movie?
Well, the time jumps aren't obvious.
Okay.
The time jumps aren't obvious. So she's talking in the future.
Yeah.
And you're realizing it, but she doesn't come into play until later in the Act 1. And so she's describing like how this guy was a famous artist and that he was in prison, that he was in an insane asylum, and that obviously his muse was this guardian, as we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
But then they get into the whole the art critic who was art seller.
Well, he was also a prisoner in the jail.
Yes.
And saw his work and said, "I want to buy it. I want to buy your work." And
one painting.
Yeah, he goes, but Benicio del Toro's like, "You're a prisoner here, What are you going to give me?" And he goes, "Well, I'll give you the typical jailhouse currency. Here's a couple pack of smokes. Here's a couple of this, right?"
Right.
He goes, "But when I get out of here, I'll give you all this money and I'll make you rich.
Here's my IOU.
Yeah, here's my IOU."
Well, it turns out he is a famous art collector seller.
He's a dealer.
He's a dealer, yes.
Yeah.
And so him and his two brothers, who's Henry
Winkler, right?
First time appearance,
yeah.
And they conspire, in a sense, to get this guy to do a gigantic, after they've gone out and promoted him like crazy to the modern art world, saying, and I will say the painting was very modern artist, because they did show his representation. They conspire to go out in the entire world and try to get, $13 million worth of...
They want to take it on a tour, they want to show the world.
Right.
And
they promise everyone he will bring and produce another great set of artwork.
Yes.
So they orchestrate this entire thing to get A, the promotion, B, the generate the hype, basically the buzz and hype men, and then C, they then induce the Guardian to tell him he needs to produce something else because he doesn't want to do anything else.
So he does produce something else.
Yep.
And so they want to go to the prison, they want to see the work. And much to their dismay, Dane.
Yes.
Why were they upset with what they saw?
So, he did basically a clever little end around. He did produce the work.
5 big pieces.
5 gigantic pieces of very modern art. But he basically permanently imbued it into cement and concrete of the prison walls.
He made a wall fresco on the prison walls, which could not be removed from the prison and taken around the world and displayed like they had promised everybody.
Right. So basically, you got to come to the prison to see him.
Right. Right. So they were very disappointed.
Yes, they were very disappointed in what he had done.
Yes. So that kind of ends Act 1, right? And it's this really, tightly knit story that is about, a 20, 30-minute little vignette within the entire movie, right?
I mean, the movie is laid out like a magazine.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, once again, we go to the act cards, which we've talked about that we love. And the next act is called Revisions to a Manifesto. Mm-hmm. And this star in this little vignette is Timothy Chalamet.
Oh my God, your brother is in this movie?
I couldn't believe it. Yeah. So,
and Frances McDormand, she's not really well known, right?
Her name is Lucinda Crements in this movie. and she is the writer for
the magazine.
For the magazine, the French Dispatch, and she is writing a story about a kind of a student protest that's going on in France, right? And it's being led by this young, charming gentleman named Zeffirelli, which is Timothy Chalamet.
Yes, chess master.
Yes, chess master. And I thought it was funny. They were having this like discussion in this hall with all these like students, right? And then they said, "Oh, this is." She says, "This is representative of the class here," and there was like 2 girls standing over to the side. Then she tells them to like leave or something like that. I started laughing at that part, but yeah. So
it was the student protests, which is
a student protest
in France,
and then it gets bigger. In fact, it gets bigger than even Zeffirelli thought it was going to get. But somehow, in trying to chase the story, Dane, Lucinda Crements, Frances McDormand, ends up in bed with Zeffirelli. Do you remember that?
I think that's called writer. What's the word I'm looking for? Writer. A betrayal. Writer.
I don't know.
She's basically joined the locals. What's the word? I can't.
Right.
Yes. So it's strongly implied that Zeffirelli and her are sleeping together.
Right. Well, the first way she saw him, he was in a bathtub writing his manifesto.
Oh, that's right.
And, she walks in, and he keeps saying, "I'm so embarrassed of my newly developed muscles." Remember that?
Right. My newly developed muscles. Yeah. Please excuse my newly developed muscles.
Yeah. So, but he's writing
Very Wes Anderson.
Yeah, writing his manifesto, and then she asks for it, and he's like, "Well, can you come here?" And she's like, "No, bring it to me." So he pops out of the tub, runs his manifesto
over, butt naked.
So she can read it, and she starts proofreading it. She's like, "There's so many grammatical errors."
She has an appendix.
Yeah. So she starts, kind of grading his manifesto, but she basically said, "This is pretty good. This is pretty inspiring." Right? So,
like this cheese, this fromage is very inspiring.
So, with that going on, and there's a little bit of a revolution going on, which they call the chessboard revolution.
Yes, because the authorities and Zeffirelli and his cohorts are basically going back and forth exchanging chess moves over the prison guard walls.
Yes, and that student's name was Mitch.
Oh yeah, Mitch.
So that was kind of funny, but it inspires a greater uprising. And so, in the end of this act, how does this end for Timothy? Or I should say Zeffirelli.
So there's he is doing the chessboard act with the authorities,
right?
And then he gets distracted
by another girl.
Yeah. The other leader of the female side of things.
The female side, yeah.
And there's going to be some quasi-dancing with some jukebox-ness.
Yeah, and they play some like really hip music that you would expect in a Wes Anderson movie.
Yes.
Right? But they kind of come together and kind of resolve all the things that they need to resolve, right?
Right.
So,
so what ends up happening is there's a giant fight between the military.
Yes.
Because they're like, where's the next chess move? Oh, that's enough of this. Go in there.
Right.
And then they start, strangely, they're shooting fireworks off.
Right.
And I don't think anyone gets killed in that particular thing.
No.
But
it just kind of ends. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, that was an odd one.
So that was the end of Vignette 2.
Vignette 3, toi!
Vignette 3. Now we're talking about Jeffrey Wright, who we talked about, plays Commissioner Gordon in Westworld.
Right, Felix Leiter.
This is the guy that's, he has his irons in a lot of fires too, or whatever. A lot of irons in the fires, we say, with The Rock and Zendaya.
Especially if he was playing Commissioner Gordon in Westworld.
Yes. But you know what? I don't mind this guy. I like this guy as an actor, so...
No mustache, no beard. He looked very weird.
Yeah, then he almost had kind of a...
no beard, how like baby face people
Then he kind of had like a little Richard Pompadour kind of thing, going. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So, But this vignette is called The Private Dining of the Police Commissioner.
Private dining of the... That's like us, getting
Yes.
some private dining here.
I hope you don't mind us chomping down on this food. We're so hungry. I think we're still got a little jet lag, being over here in France. But,
All right.
But
At the L'Orangerie
Yep.
in the back room.
all right. So during a television interview, and by the way, I thought it was interesting, Jeffrey Wright's name in this movie is Roebuck Wright. So when I hear Roebuck, I think of Sears and Roebuck.
Yeah.
But then they kept his last name the same, Wright. So
Roebuck Wright.
Roebuck Wright, yeah. So during a television interview, Roebuck Wright, he recounts the story of his attending of a private dinner with a commissioner of the NOA police force. He was a legendary police officer who had a legendary chef. And that chef was making them a dinner, and they're at this dinner party, and they're all enjoying it. Very interesting food, and the chef would come out and bring out the foods. But then something happened in the middle of dinner. It was told that the son of or was it the son or the daughter?
The son.
The son of the police chief had been kidnapped. And who?
By Edward Norton.
I was
and
gonna
his
say-
notorious gang.
I was going to say, who was it that kidnapped him? Edward Norton.
Yeah, and I
So-
don't remember, they were protesting about something. I don't remember what it was.
I know.
But
So it's kind of weird how Wes Anderson did this. But if you looked at it, he always shows like the side profiles of the buildings where you can see all the rooms. And the party that was going on with the police was just almost like across the street where the kidnappers were, and they had the, you know what I mean? So you can almost like see it in like a kind of a pan to the right, like here's the police officers in this party,
enjoying their food.
and then here's the
kidnapping
kidnappers,
going on
and
at the
then
same time.
here's the one room on the third floor where the little boy is.
No one's
Right,
watching.
Right. So what was funny was they go back and forth and they try to negotiate, and then I think they even have a little bit of a shoot 'em up, but then there's kind of a truce. And then the little boy says to the girl who's kind of watching him, "Tell my dad I'm hungry to send the cook with the food."
With the food.
Right? and he even said, "They'll even feed your gang." Right?
Right.
So
And he's, of course, they know he's got a celebrated chef in there.
Right,
So
right.
The boy is almost like, I don't care that I've been kidnapped.
right.
Just tell my dad to send the chef. I'm
Yeah,
hungry.
I'm hungry, right? So now of course nobody knows that, but there's code in there in that little speech, right? For the boy relaying something back. So what happens is the commissioner, the police commissioner, says, "All right, I need to feed my boy. I will send in some food for my boy, and I'll send in food for all of you, and to eat and partake of the meal from this great chef."
Right.
So the chef goes to work.
Well, no, then Edward Norton guy says, and make sure the chef comes.
Yeah, make sure,
Yeah.
because it's very important what happens when the chef arrives. So the chef prepares this great meal and all these, plates and everything. So all the meals get, pulled over to across the street, it looks like, to the gangster's house. And, everybody sits down for this meal, but Edward Norton looks over at the chef, and what does he say?
You try everything first.
"You try everything first, and we're going to watch you."
Yep.
Now, the narrator at this point, I think, was the little boy who was talking, because I think it was the little boy, because he goes, or no, maybe it was somebody else. Maybe it was Jeffrey Wright. It was Jeffrey Wright.
It was
still
Jeffrey
narrating.
Wright still talking about, yeah.
And he's saying, now, Edward Norton and his gang were worried that all this food was poison. And of course it was poison. He goes, so the chef,
fantastic feast.
so the
poison.
chef went ahead and ate all the food in front of them, right?
Well, pieces of the food, sampled everything.
Sampled everything.
Just to prove it's not poison.
Just to prove it's not poison, but yet he knew it was poison.
Yes.
And he took everything.
Famous
so
chef.
Once they saw him do this, they all felt like they could eat because he lived. So everybody is chowing down, eating, and saying, "Oh, how delicious this is! This is great food." Blah 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 blah. Cut to like 15 minutes later, and everybody in the house is just like dead, including The chef who's on the floor, right?
Right. But then they said he's not really dead. He's done this so many times.
Right.
He's built up a constitution to it.
Yeah, but they still have to take him over next door to revive him.
Right.
And they're like giving him an antidote or something,
Yeah,
right?
something like that.
Yeah. So to make sure that he doesn't die. But yeah, it's like he's done this before. The commissioner knew he has done this before. The little boy has known that he has done this before. That's why he called for the chef,
right?
Because he knew what would happen. And of course, they get the little boy out of there, and then Jeffrey Wright finishes his story.
Right, and this is a famous story. He's being interviewed by Liv Schreiber. How do you pronounce his name? Liv
Schreiber.
Liv Schreiber is interviewing him on a talk show, and Jeffrey Wright has a cartography memory? I forget what it was called.
I don't know.
Well, it's not. He remembers every word he's ever written. So Liv Schreiber's asking him to recount a story that's written, and so he can remember every single line from he's ever written, and that's where this story comes from. But it's pretty well done from that standpoint. I mean, and then this jumps back. So this is Act 3, right?
That was the finish of Act 3.
Yeah.
So then the next card is simply called the obituary. And what has happened is they show that Arthur Howitzer has died. And I think they've got him laid out on a table or something. Because
he's in his office.
He's in his office.
He had a heart attack in his office.
Yeah. And so you see his shoes, but the rest of him is under a blanket. But all the people have come together, that have worked for him, and they're all reminiscing kind of about him, and but a lot of them are worried. So one of the kind of side gags that was going on throughout the movie was whenever the reporters would travel or do something, they'd have to submit their expenses, right? and so Bill Murray was always questioning the expenses. You needed 3 nights and
the Ritz-Carlton?
At the Ritz-Carlton to do this?
Monaco?
Yeah.
Yes, because I was with this terrorist who needed to whatever.
But in the end, he always approved the expenses. But one of the persons says, does that mean we're going to get our expenses approved, right? Because he's dead, right? They were worried about that. Yeah. So I thought that was pretty funny.
Right, yeah.
So
So I mean, in essence, it was touching because they had all these different little stories that wrapped around him being the editor of each one of these individual writers. The format of the movie was written more like a travel log.
Yeah,
and so not your typical type of movie.
Well, your typical Wes Anderson movie.
Yeah, very French too, I should say that, and maybe he was doing that as a wink, wink. Because American movies always have an MC who has an objective, blah, blah, blah. In this particular case, it was more about things, which is very French movies.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, there you had it. Your Wes Anderson French Dispatch. So, Dane, I'm just curious, as a big fan of Wes Anderson, he's like your number 3 director of all time. Is there anything you would have done different about this movie?
Well, yes. I mean, one of the things I thought was unfortunate was that there was no strong arc in the entire movie with a beginning main character trying to achieve an objective, which is, very American movies. French movies do not tend to do that. I should say European maybe, but French movies don't tend to do that. But, they could have easily made Bill Murray striving to achieve the big goal. So he was going in and directing these people a little bit more. And then they did that weird thing where there was a time jump where you find out he died much earlier. And it's what's the payoff there? I would rather know that as a tragedy at the end.
Right.
I thought, some the Jeffrey Wright one.
Although he did hint to it in the beginning. Yeah. That he knew something was wrong with him.
And all the stories kind of was way too much dialogue. I mean,
oh, wow. You're saying that about...
Yes. Jeffrey Wright one was very... Come on. There was way too much talking. The first one I thought was very interesting. The writer... and it's based on a... So you can kind of tell with Wes Anderson, if you're a little bit more familiar with certain genres, you can tell where he gets his inspiration from. And there's a famous French artist called Chaim Soutine, who, same thing, poor guy... went insane for a while, made these and he's a famous artist that no one really has heard about, but he's up there now kind of climbing with Picasso and Chagall and things like that. He was a contemporary of those guys, but he would draw like bloodied chickens.
Wow.
Which were not like obviously popular at the time, but he did this like super realism. And so if you saw the artwork of Chaim Soutine and saw what Benicio del Toro was doing,
Right.
you could kind of see they were obviously basing it on him because of the way the pictures were similar.
Right.
But you know, so you can, you know, that I just think that they didn't do enough pulling you in. I mean, there was some interesting things with that first one, but then the other ones they could have just done better with. You know, in making it more dangerous or more like they just kind of like tried to make a joke out of everything.
Right.
It just didn't work for me. So
Okay. Oh, wow. Wes Anderson didn't work for you.
No.
Okay. All right. Well,
what about you? You think you could find anything that you could change that would maybe make things a little bit better?
the only way that I feel like I could have done anything to change this is to take off from the site and nuke this script from orbit, because it's the only way to make sure that this thing didn't see the light of day. So that's the only thing that I would do different. So,
well, so in other words, you agree with me?
I know, yeah, I was not a fan of the movie. Not a fan of the movie. I know I seemed all chipper and joyful as I described this because I wanted to kind of hide how I felt about this movie from you. But now you're getting a little taste of how I felt about this movie. So,
well, I agree.
all right. So I know that we didn't tell. I think we forgot to tell our viewers if they wanted to miss the spoilers to
We haven't
check
gotten
out.
to our review yet.
Well, we haven't got to the Cult Lords review.
Yes.
So, but, I mean, normally we would say, come on in to do our Cult Lords reviews, but
Come on in.
we'll have to do a little disclaimer for in the beginning of when to leave, so you can come back to this point, and we'll wait for them to come in.
The charcuterie board was just too good after all that waiting.
Yeah, we'll finish this charcuterie, and we'll wait for those fans to come in.
Some Armagnac.
Yep.
We want our fans to come back. Let's pour ourselves a little eau de vie
Yeah.
and ruminate about this movie a little bit more.
And then we are going to come back in just a few minutes with our Cult Lord ratings. And we are back, everybody. Ready to do the Cult Lords ratings.
Yeah, but first I'm going to pour a little bit more of this pretty strong Armagnac.
Ooh.
Woo, man, we're going to fill up these glasses, and what are we doing with this charcuterie board?
I think we are almost done here.
We've chomped that baby down. So, once again, we're here to give you the Cult Lord ratings. We're in the tail end of our experience at L'Orangerie back office. We're finishing up, and where are we heading next?
I think we're going to hit the Pigalle Square, right?
Ah, yeah. Whoa, the Pigalle
The
Square.
night is young. The night is young.
Pigalle Square.
Yeah.
Clank.
Clank. All right. So everybody should come back in. We're about to give our Cult Lords ratings on Dane's number 3 director of all time, above Steven Spielberg, who doesn't even get listed on his top 8 list, who, you know, isn't worthy to make a movie like The French Dispatch, but that's okay.
right.
That's okay. We will,
Right, Spielberg.
we'll give, you know,
Pshaw.
we will give
I
our...
thumb my nose in his general direction.
All right, so let's get ready to do our Cult Lords ratings. You ready? We haven't seen these, so...
So once again, we're going to be talking about the Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh, thank you for doing that, Dane.
Let me pour a little bit more for you.
Oh, yeah, a little bit
here.
too much Armagnac. Okay, so we always like to do the Rotten Tomatoes scores.
Yes.
Thank you for reminding me. So, on the Rotten Tomatoes score, the critics give this a 75%.
Okay.
Yes.
75.
Of course, Oscar showed him no love, but the critics seem to.
No, Oscar.
All right.
No amor.
Yeah. And so the audience gave this a 76%.
Wow, that's rare to have them two lined up like that.
By 1 point, it separates the two. 75% and 76%.
Okay.
You can see that this is generally loved, this movie. Okay, so we are now going to give our Cult Lords rating score. And are you ready, Dane?
We are ready, and I'm going to do the count.
Oh, you do the count. Oh, because yes.
Are we in the right order here? Yes.
Got to do it in French.
We're going to do it in French.
Yes.
Êtes-vous prêts? 3, 2, 1.
Oh, man. Voulez-vous coucher avec...
Voulez-vous coucher avec Cult Lords?
Here's one French word I know. Garbage.
Le garbage.
Le garbage.
6.6 and 5.3.
Oh, yeah. I think this might be the lowest rated movie that
This is the first time that we've actually been below both audience and fans.
Yes.
And it is the lowest rating movie we've ever done.
So, Dane, don't want to give away anything for our fans, but one thing this movie did teach me is I think I have discovered the prescription to insomnia. So if I was not reviewing this, I think I would have turned it off, or if I had watched this a little bit later in the night, fallen asleep. So I want to make a PSA announcement right here. If you are suffering from insomnia, my suggestion to you is to get out of bed and go downstairs, warm a half a glass of milk in the microwave. Then grab a bottle of melatonin, take one pill, just one.
You need all this?
Drink your half glass of milk, then return to your bed, grab your iPad, or if you don't sleep with anybody, turn your TV on and turn it on to the French Dispatch. And I promise you that within 1 hour, you will be fast asleep and sleep in the night through.
Basically after Act 1.
Yes, you will be sleeping like a baby. And the side effects for this prescription, although very rare, I would say maybe 99% of the people this is going to work for. But you might be the 1% that suffers from explosive diarrhea, serious migraines, or you might actually like a Wes Anderson movie, The French Dispatch. You might actually like it. Now, if you suffer from explosive diarrhea, I can promise you that it was not from The French Dispatch. You might want to check the date on that milk that you just drank. Yes, that date on the milk that you just drank might be a little bit old. That. But if you want to sleep through the night, watch The French Dispatch. All right. Now,
Yes.
Dane, I went on a tirade here because this was...
Tell us what you really
This
think.
was garbage. And, I like a lot of other Wes Anderson movies. I like the Life Aquatic Steve Zissou. I liked the Grand Budapest Hotel. I love Fantastic Mr. Fox. But you know what? When I watched this, I felt like I've seen this before. And this one didn't make as much sense. And, yeah. It was, and I understand, it's like a Jackson Pollock painting. A lot of people will look at that Jackson Pollock painting and see the artistry in it. And I see hints of artistry in this, right? But to me, I look at a Jackson Pollock and I think a kindergartner could have done that. That's junk art. I don't get Jackson Pollock at all. And I did not get this movie at all. So
There is a trick to Jackson Pollock.
Oh, well.
You have to take it and blow it out much bigger than you think.
Please tell me the trick, because, all right, I'm going to get
I
on.
fully agree with you
All
on
right.
your soapbox there.
Okay.
And I was very disappointed. My wife was very disappointed too. So it wasn't just me, and obviously not just you. So it was unfortunately just a failure. I mean, he did lots of nuances and details and, the usual Wes Anderson tropes as we had talked about. But I mean, there just wasn't anything that drove this movie forward. You didn't really care too much about the characters. I mean,
No.
he had Bill Murray in there, but it was like,
He was
almost
not
nothing in
He's
there.
the main character who had maybe 15 minutes of screen
Right,
time.
I know. I mean, it was like I think where he failed on this particular movie is trying to turn a magazine into a movie.
All right.
And so he, tried to adapt it and everything, but it was unfortunately that, I agree. Too much talking, two little new things that we have not seen before. I mean, this is coming off the heels of Bucharest Hotel.
Grand Budapest Hotel.
Grand Budapest Hotel. A very similar feel.
Right, a very similar feel.
mean, you know.
But you know what? When I saw the Grand Budapest Hotel, I kind of felt like I hadn't really seen all this before. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I know we've seen the Royal Tenenbaums and we've seen the quirkiness of Wes Anderson, but he changed a lot for the Grand Budapest Hotel to where I liked it. Here, I felt like I was watching a cheap ripoff of it. Me trying to write a Wes Anderson film, probably would have been The French Dispatch, right? So,
Right.
I'm surprised you didn't like it though, because I came in thinking he's gonna like this movie. He's gonna like this movie.
This is the lowest I've ever made a movie.
And I'm gonna come in here and
you're gonna be.
I'm gonna nuke this from
You're
orbit.
gonna say mailed.
Yes.
You're gonna be dropping some mailed on this film movie.
Oh yes.
But
yes.
yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I mean, it just, like I said, it's unfortunately repeating, drawn out. No continuity between there's no arc of a main character or any of the characters. It was he needed to somebody to come in and fix all these pieces. Well, and it just didn't work.
Now we know why this director who is so beloved by Hollywood got 0 Oscar nominations for this. Even though the Rotten Tomatoes score is pretty impressive.
And I almost think those are sympathy votes or something because that's the thing about him is he does all this homework to create this world.
You're right.
But you can create a world if you don't make it compelling. It's still going to be
See, as I was watching this, I was saying to myself, I'm going to be so uncool and so unhipster because I don't like this movie. Because I bet you all the hipsters love this movie. And I said, Dane's going to love this movie. Dane's wife is going to love this movie.
Pleasantly surprised.
I was surprised. Yeah, I was surprised, actually. So, yeah.
Well, here's to surprises.
Here's to surprises. Well,
we need some directors to come up with some more surprises.
And you know what? We learned today that his next movie is called Asteroid City. Whatever the hell that means, Asteroid City. But all I'm asking Wes Anderson is do better. Do better than this.
Do better.
You can do better. So, all right. Well, luckily, this wraps up the French Dispatch Week. And Dane... you're going to have to step back out of your French world. Dane, as we've said before, was a French language major, and he's been so nice to write up some French that we've used throughout the show.
Yes.
And he has written up some cool things for us to say in French to say goodbye. So
I will. À mon vieux pote, JR, I've given some French words to say, but
yes. So what are you going to say?
Au revoir, les fans.
All right. And I'm going to say, vous avez la tour d'un cheval. All right? So,
yeah. The fans will love that.
Oh, all right. We'll see you next time.
All right.
Thanks, Dane, for writing that for me.
You're welcome.